Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's business studies lesson. My name is Tidi Sotlaka. This lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in association with Sci-Bono Discovery Center, broadcast by Pagama Research and Development. Today we look into business studies grade 12, and the main topics we look into is your business environment and business operation, because we are looking into revision for paper 1. So basically the two main topics that are there are your business environment and business operation. So we'll be looking into the structure of the exam and other aspects, and I'm the presenter, Tsidi Sotlaka. So as we proceed now, our lesson outcomes. By the end of this revision lesson, you should understand the structure of your paper, and you should also understand the main topics that are covered in your paper 1. And you should also look into the following legislation. We're going to look into Employment Equity Act and look into Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act. So that is what we are going to look into. So let's just start with our lesson and look into the structure of the paper. With your examination, remember the total is 150, and this is how your 150 is structured. You have your section A, B, and C. So your section A has compulsory short questions. So we'll start with your allocation of marks. There is that the total mark for section A is 30, and 15 marks is from the business environment, and 15 marks is from the business operations. And you should know that the time allocated for your section A, you should complete your section A in 20 minutes. And then when you're looking into types of questions, you can expect to get, for 1.1, you can get your multiple choice. And for 1.2, you can get choosing the correct word, and you'll be given words inside a box. So you have to choose the correct word using the statement that will be there. And then you also have 1.3, which will represent now matching items, your column A and column B. So that is the first part of your question paper, which is section A. And then we also have section B. So in your section B, the instruction is you should choose any 2 questions for 40 marks. So that would give you a total mark of 80. And the time allocated there is 70 minutes, meaning 35 minutes for each question and 35 for another. And then when you are looking into the structure, question 2 will basically have questions from the business environment. And remember, what is in your business environment? We are talking about legislation. We are talking also about business sectors and their environments and business strategy. Then when you look into question 3 now, you'll have to be assessed with business operation for 40 marks. And then when you're looking into 40 marks from the business operations, you would be assessed from the following subtopics, which is your human resources and your quality of performance. And then with question 4, we have miscellaneous, which is 40 marks total. So we will be having the combination of both business environments and business operations for 20 marks each. So you should know that here you are allowed to choose question 2 or question 3, or you are allowed to choose question 2 and question 4, or choose question 3 and 4, or 4 and 2. It depends on the question. And the advice I would give you is that before you start writing, you should look into all the questions to say which questions now are going to give you, or which question is going to give you a lot of marks. You can check question 2, question 3, and question 4. And remember that each and every question has low order questioning. What do we mean by low order questioning? Low order questioning are your identify, your name, your give, your outline, which normally has 4 to 6 marks. So normally that would be now a hook. So look into the hook and look into other questions towards the end of the question, so that you don't choose based on 4 marks. Because you know a 4-mark question, then you think you know the entire question too. It doesn't mean that. You should check and calculate the possibility of getting maybe 40 out of 40 for each question. And then when we look now into section C, section C as well consists of 2 questions, but the instruction is that you need to choose 1 question in your section C, meaning this is now a long question which we consider to be an essay question. So an essay question for question 5, for instance, will derive from the business environment. It can either be legislation or business strategy, or when you're looking into legislation, you would be expected to choose from one of the acts. And then we also have question 6, which can be from business operations. And remember, we have 2 subtopics under business operations. So an essay can either be your human resources or it can be your quality of performance. And then when we are looking into the mark allocation, you'd get 40 marks. So you choose only one question between question 5 and question 6. And then the time allocated for you to complete your essay is 30 marks. So that is the structure of your paper. Section A is 30, then section B is 80, because you have to choose 2 questions between the 3 that would be there. And then section C is 40 marks, because there you have to choose one essay question which consists of 40 marks, and you should complete that question in 30 minutes. Now, let us look into the main topics we have there. We have the following main topics. The first one is the business environment, and we also have the business operations. So I'm going to basically take you through the subtopics that you would find in your business environment and the subtopics you would find in your business operations. So you should remember that these would represent question 2 and question 5 in your essay. That is question 5. In your section B, that is question 2. And again, it would be reflected in question what now? 4, which is a miscellaneous, a combination of both business environment and business operation. When we come to business operation, we have question what now? 3 and question 6. Remember, question 3 is for section B, and question 6 is for section C, and with question 4 is a combination, remember, of both business operations and business environment. So that is how now the questions would be structured in the exam. Now let us look into the subtopics now under the different main topics. The business environment has legislation, which is what you normally call acts, and then we also have business sectors and their environments. My advice for business sectors and their environments is that the mark allocation here is normally 9 marks, because you have to identify the sector maybe that might be represented by the scenario. After that, you should be expected to identify challenges from a scenario and classify the challenges according to the challenge, and thereafter state the extent of control for each environment. Then with business environment, business strategy, that's where now you need to write the types of maybe strategies, the challenges from each environment as well. When we're talking about SWOT analysis, what do we use to scan the environments? So that is your business strategy. But we'll look into your exam guideline now to check what can be part and parcel of each. Now, with your legislations, you are expected to know what is skills development. And remember, with your legislations, these acts would be assessed. We have skills development, we have Labor Relations Act, we have Employment Equity Act, and we also have the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, together with the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, and the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, together with the National Credit Act and Consumer Protection Act. So these are the acts that you should know for the exam. So you should further know how to maybe identify each act from a scenario. You should know the purpose of each act. You should know the impact of each act. When we're talking about the impact, we are talking about the positives and negatives for each act. You should know ways to comply. You should also know discriminatory actions according to each act, and further know the penalties for non-compliance. And when we are looking into these acts, the way they are categorized is the first 6 acts, which is your skills development, labor relations, employment equity, basic conditions, broad-based, and compensation for occupational. They are considered to be labor laws. Labor laws, because now they protect the employees. They protect the employees. So they were developed to protect the employees. But then we only have 2 acts which we consider to be consumer laws. So those are the two acts that we consider to be consumer laws. What is important now when we are looking into the legislations is we should know the keywords for each legislation for us to be able to identify the act from a statement, to identify the act maybe in your section A, your multiple choice, your matching column A and B. You should know that when we are talking about skills development, anything that we talk about training, anything that we talk about upgrading the skills of workers is applicable to skills development. And then when we're talking about labor relations, anything that we talk about trade unions, anything that we talk about employees' rights and employers' rights, and that is considered to be now addressing issues of labor relations. And then when you're looking into employment equity, if you see a scenario maybe talking about employing those who were previously disadvantaged, if you see a scenario talking about affirmative action, you should know that is considered to be Employment Equity Act. And then when we are looking into the basic conditions of Employment Act, previously or in the previous question papers, the focus becomes the provisions of each act. When we are talking about the provisions, we are talking about hours of work, we are talking about the leave conditions, we are talking about termination of employment contract. So immediately we are talking about that, you should know that we are talking about the basic conditions of Employment Act, and it addresses employees' needs inside the business or the organization. And then when we look into the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, is an act that talks about the distribution of wealth, because in the past it used not to happen in the right way. So immediately you see taking females to management positions, you know that we are talking about pillars, and you should know that we have 5 pillars of Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment. You should know that here we have provisions that are categorized now according to the newly established exam guideline. Then when you're looking into compensation for occupational injuries and disease, immediately we talk about injuries, immediately we talk about an employee passing away while they're performing their duties or contracting a particular disease. You should know that we are talking about this act, which is COIADA, Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease. But when we look into these two consumer laws now, the other consumer law, which is National Credit Act, focuses on now the process of buying goods on credit, the process of applying for credit. So immediately you see loans, you immediately see granting of credit in a scenario or statement, you should know that the act that is applicable there is your National Credit Act. And when we are looking into Consumer Protection Act, immediately you talk about the consumer rights. You should know that consumer rights apply to both the consumer laws. But when we are looking into consumer rights under consumer protection, we would be talking about maybe the right to privacy, we would be talking about the right to fair and honest dealings, we would be talking about making sure that in the process of buying, consumers are protected by the law. So that is your Consumer Protection Act. Now let us look into sectors. When you're looking into sectors, you would be expected to understand this according to your exam guideline. You would be expected to identify the 3 types of business sectors, which is your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary sector. Those are the 3 sectors. So basically a scenario would be provided to you, and a business would be basically given a task to say this business maybe produces or converts raw material into finished goods and services, or actually the name of the business again can be another tip to say, is this business primary, secondary, or tertiary? If we are talking for an example, we can say maybe we have John's Mining. You should know that when we are saying John's Mining in this scenario, you should know that the business is primary sector. And then when you're talking about maybe manufacturing, they would say maybe for the secondary sector, the name of the business can be manufacturing, or the name can end with manufacturing. When we say maybe Letabo manufactures maybe bags or fashionable bags, you should know that we are talking about the secondary sector in that case. And then after identifying the sector, the scenario now would provide statements about the sector as well. And then you would also be given challenges that the business is facing. So the aim is for you to classify the challenges according to the environment. And remember, we have three environments, which is your micro, your market, and your macro. So you should be able to classify each environment according to the environment. So remember, when we're talking about the micro, we are referring to the internal workings of the business, which is basically inside the organization. When we are looking into the market, we are focusing on the issue of aspects that are immediately outside, like your suppliers, like your consumers, like your trade unions. Those can be considered to be immediately outside. So most of the time, the scenario will talk about suppliers not being able to deliver on time. That is a challenge for the business. When we're looking into micro, the scenario maybe will talk about employees who are forever absent. And then when we're looking into macro, it can talk about maybe the interest rate that is high, can talk about the political changes that were implemented, restricting maybe a business to operate effectively. So those are considered to be the three business environments, and then you should identify them and classify them according to the challenges or that are given in the scenario. And the last question now would ask you to state the extent of control businesses have over each environment. Maybe the idea that micro, because it's the internal workings of the business, is basically everything that is inside. The business has full control over micro. And then when you are looking into market, the business now has some control but can influence maybe the suppliers, and can also influence the consumers. But then when you're looking into macro, the business has no control completely over the issues. And then we also have business strategy. The focus for business strategy is for you to know the strategic management process and to also know the industry analysis tools. What do we mean with the strategic management process? This is a process of managing a strategy. Hence, would say the business would have to have a clear vision, mission, and objectives in place and check if their mission is realistic. And then thereafter, they will have to check the idea of now the tools available to scan the environment. Hence, when we are talking about the tools available, we also talk about the idea that the business has to do environmental scanning using SWOT analysis, using Potter's 5 forces, and also using the pestle analysis. Thereafter, they would have to develop an alternative, formulate an alternative strategy referring to your types of business strategies. And then thereafter, they would have to look into implementing the strategy and checking if it is making changes. So that is the strategic management process. That is how a business would manage their strategy. And you should know that when we are talking about managing a strategy, we are saying the business has their main strategy, but then when they are developing or when they are doing strategic management process, they are basically trying to make sure that their strategies are aligned to any changes in the environment. Hence, scanning using the industry analysis tools becomes important. We will also show what are those industry analysis tools. We have three because the business has three environments that interacts within. And then we have types of business strategies. We will also have to know the types of business strategies that we have 4 types of business strategies. And then we'll also look into the strategic evaluation process. That is what you should know under your business strategy. And then your industry analysis, we have SWOT analysis, which scans the microenvironment. This basically scans what is inside the organization. We also have Potter's 5 forces, which scans now the environment we call the market, which is immediately outside the organization. And we have the pestle elements, which scans now the macro environment. So those are the 3 now industry analysis tools that I talked about. So we use to scan each environment so that we obtain information and we manage our strategy using the recent changes in the environment. And then as we further proceed, you should also know the types of strategies which would be used as alternative strategies in the strategic management process. It can be the integration. When we're looking into the integration strategy, we look into forward, we look into backward and horizontal integration strategy, which are considered to be now takeovers or mergers that a business can use to take over other businesses. And then we have intensive, which focuses on market penetration. It also talks about or focuses on increasing the sales of the business. We have your market penetration as a type of intensive strategy. We also have your product development and market development. So let me just remind you to say under integration, we have forward. We also have backward. And we also have horizontal. Then when we are looking into intensive, we have market penetration. We also have product development and market development. So those are the types of intensive, those are the types of integration, forward, backward, and horizontal. Diversification, we have concentric. We also have under your diversification, your horizontal. And the last part becomes your conglomerate. Then we also have the defensive. With the defensive, we look into divestiture. Then we have retrenchment. And we also have liquidation. So those are the types for each strategy. You should know the types of strategy and their types. Integration, we are talking about forward, backward, and horizontal. Intensive, we are talking about your market development, product development, and market penetration. And then when you're looking into types of diversification, we are looking into conglomerate, concentric, and horizontal. Each strategy has its main maybe purpose. When we're looking into integration, the aim is to take over. When we are looking into intensive, the aim is to increase the market share of the business, because we are talking about market development, meaning selling an existing product in a new market. Market penetration, we're talking about making sure that you lower the prices of a new product coming in the market. Product development, we are talking about introducing a new product or modifying an existing product to become new in a already existing market. When we look into diversification, the aim there is to make sure that the business has different product ranges. Hence, we are talking about adding a product that might be related or unrelated to the existing one. It can be the concentric way, it can be the horizontal way, or the conglomerate way. And then we also have defensive. This is the last resort. Basically, a business can apply 1, 2, and 3, but this is the last resort. A business cannot start by applying defensive, because with defensive, the first part is to apply divestiture. With divestiture, the business sells some assets that are not making profit for their business so that they reduce the cost. If that fails, they would have to retrench workers in the business. And then if that fails as well, they fail to make profit after those two, they now decide to do liquidation, which is the process of selling all assets that the business has. So those are your types of business strategies. Now we look into business operations. Under business operations, we have quality of performance and the human resources. The two are forever assessed. There's no need for one to pick and choose. You should forever be ready for you to pass your paper one. Your paper one has only 5 topics, We have 3 from the business environment, and I showed you, and we also have 2 from the business operations, meaning you should study everything so that you become secure. So we have quality of performance here and the human resources. When we are looking into the 2, we will look into the exam guideline to say, what does it say about this? What should you know when you are heading to write your June or your final exam? When we'll start with the human resource. Human resource has activities. You should know what is to be done under the recruitment activity. Remember, under the recruitment, this is a process of attracting a suitable candidate for a job who has qualifications and skills. Hence, we talk about the recruitment procedure to say what would the business do to attract. Hence, the human resource manager under the recruitment procedure has to prepare job analysis and job description. And they should also maybe establish what is their job specifications or the key performance for the post that they want to advertise. Because human resources is about recruiting, meaning to attract candidates who are maybe looking for a job. So you should know what the person would be doing. Hence, it is important to identify the job description and specification. After you have done that as a human resource manager, you now choose the method of recruitment to say, do you want to attract this candidate from outside or from inside the organization? And then after that, if the internal recruitment does not work, then you consider external, and then you choose the right now sources for external. And the last part should be about advertising in the right platform so that the suitable candidates can see the post and advert and apply. And then other aspects that are included in the recruitment is the issues now that we talked about, your job description and the methods of recruitment. So your job description and specification, you should know the difference between the two. To say the job description talks about the difference between now your what is your difference between your job analysis, which is your job description, and specification. Job description refers to duties and responsibilities of the vacant post, and when we look into your job specification, it addresses the issues such as the minimum acceptable qualifications, personality, and qualities needed for that particular job. So that is the difference between job description and specification. We also look into the impact of internal recruitment and the impact of external recruitment, looking into positives and negatives. Immediately you know those, you are basically covered for your recruitment. Then we look into selection. Under selection, you should know the selection procedure. You should know the issue of interview. You should know selection, screening as part of selection. Interview, the role of the interviewer before, the role of the interviewer during, and the role of the interviewee during. And then we also have to know aspects of an employment contract which can be included. You should know the definition of employment contract. Those are aspects that should be considered when you're looking into selection procedure or when you're studying for selection procedure. Then we also have induction. With induction, you should know aspects such as your benefits of induction, the purpose of induction, which is more of introducing a new employee, to say, why does the business have to introduce a new employee? What are the benefits and how will they benefit from introducing a new employee? That is for exam. And then placement, we are talking about now placing the candidate who was selected, because remember the first part was on recruiting, attracting them to come and apply. The second part was on selecting them, and then after you have selected the right candidate and who's suitable during the interviews and everything, then you need to induct them. After inducting them, you place them where they will perform optimally because of their skills. Then you determine their salary, and remember the salary determination methods that we have, it can be piecemeal or time related. With piecemeal, you should know that a worker is paid using the effort put in a particular job or using units produced. But with time related, an employee would be paid using the number of hours spent on a task. And then when we look into fringe benefits, we should know the compulsory fringe benefits, and we should also know examples of fringe benefits together with the impact of fringe benefits, to say what is the positives for a business if they offer fringe benefits and what are the negatives for a business. And the last part is on how the human resource manager would be implicated by the 4 acts, which is your skills development, your employment equity, your labor relations, regulations, and your basic conditions of employment act. So that is basically a summary of your human resources and what you should know when you are preparing for your human resources. When now we look into the quality of performance, you should know how to define the concept, which is quality, quality control, quality assurance, quality management, and quality performance. That is what you should know. But during the examiner may not ask you what is quality control alone. They rather differentiate between quality control and quality what? Assurance. So guard against that. You can't just study quality control alone. It's better to know the difference between quality control and assurance, because basically you have covered two aspects of your exam guideline. And then as we proceed, you should also be able to differentiate between quality management and performance. Be able to differentiate between the two. It gives you more marks, and this is how normally the questions are asked during the exam. Then you should further be able to explain advantages or benefits of a good quality management system. What do we mean by a good quality management system? A good quality management system is a combination of these concepts, which is a business that does quality management together with quality control and quality assurance and quality performance. If they are doing all these concepts, they are having a good quality management system. So basically, if their business is applying quality control, assurance, management, and performance, they are having a good quality management system, and there are benefits for implementing a good quality management system, because a good quality management system, it means there are tools available to improve the quality of the product, and those tools are used for accountability by each business function when we are looking into quality management. And then the business, in the process of producing their product, they are able to inspect the final product, and they are also able to do checks carried out during and after the production process. And then after that, they are able to do quality performance to check the performance of each business function, and also check the performance of the product using the user's views or the customer perspective, to say, as a customer, how did you experience the product, so that they are able to judge their product. And then that combined is considered to be a good quality management system, which has advantages, because the focus for exam would be, what are the benefits, what are the advantages for a business that has a good quality management system. The issues can be the time and resources can be used efficiently. The issues can be good customer service would be rendered, which would lead to customer satisfaction. We'll also talk about the idea that the vision, mission, and objectives of the business can be achieved, and the business would have a competitive advantage over its competitors. Those are a good quality management system, because a good quality management system means now the business inspects their final product. The business checks during the process of making the product to say, are we achieving quality even in the built-in process of our quality? Remember, when we are talking about quality assurance, we are talking about making sure that the product is quality even at its initial stage, meaning in the initial stage of making the product. When we begin the product, we need to check if we are achieving quality. Hence, it says quality is checked at each and every stage of the process, so that we get the product right the first time and avoid mistakes from happening. And then as we proceed, we look into now discussing the quality performance, or how each function can contribute to the success of the business function. So that also has to be known. You should know how to explain or discuss how quality of performance can contribute to the success or failure of each business function. And what is key there to understand is that you should understand the business functions. You have 8 business functions, and you should know the quality indicators, or how each function contributes to the success. But for you to understand how a function contributes to the success, you should know the function and what it does, so that you're able to say, if this function is general management, the role is to set now the vision and mission of the organization. So how will they contribute to the success? Then they have to develop effective strategic plans. They need to set direction and allocate resources for ensuring that the mission and vision is achieved. Marketing should increase the market share. Production should produce quality products using specifications function. So you should know what the function does so that you determine how they can contribute to the success of the business. What do we mean by contributing to the success of the business? We are saying if a business saves money, if a function saves money, if a function is able to make more profit for the business, if they are also able to save resources and attract customers, then that function is contributing to the success of the business. And another phrasing of such a question, it can differ. They can sometimes say, explain how the function contributes to the success of the business, but sometimes they can say, outline the quality indicators for each business function. You should know that the same answers would be applicable whether the question comes as how each function contributes to the success or outline the quality indicators of each function. You should also know how to identify a business function from a given scenario or statement and motivate your answer by quoting. And then you should know how to define the meaning of total quality management, and you should also know how to identify the total quality management elements from a given scenario or statement and evaluate the 5 elements, which is your continuous improvement to processes and systems. We also have monitoring and evaluation. We also have continuous skills development. We also have adequate financing and capacity, and we also have your total client satisfaction. Those are the 5 elements you should focus on. And remember that when this theory was introduced, it was a comparison between a small and a large business, but due to now limitations, we focus on aspects of a large business to say how can a large business apply total quality management. Then as we proceed, you should further know how a business can apply the PDCA model or steps in improving the quality of the product. You should also know how to explain the role or importance of quality cycle as part of continuous improvement to processes and systems, and also know how to discuss the impact of total quality management if poorly implemented by the business, and explain or recommend or suggest ways in which TQM can reduce the cost of quality. Now we look into the legislation that we talked about. We look into Employment Equity Act and the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act. What is the purpose now of Employment Equity Act? The purpose of the Employment Equity Act, it allows employees who do the same work to be paid equally. And then that's one. Remember, employment equity, meaning in the process of hiring, the business should hire equally. So the Employment Equity Act allows employees who do the same work to be paid equally. It eliminates discrimination on the grounds of gender, race, and disability in the workplace. Furthermore, it promotes equal opportunities and fair treatment in the workplace. Remember, this is legislation. This is paper 1. Legislation question 2. Then it promotes diversity in the workplace by ensuring that people of diverse backgrounds are appointed, and it protects now employees from victimization if they exercise the rights given to them by the Employment Equity Act. So that is the purpose of this act. This act is there to ensure that there's equality in the workplace and make sure that they eliminate, meaning they reduce discrimination on the grounds of gender, race, and disability, especially in the process of employee. Then we look into the impact. Remember, when you're looking into legislation, you should know the purpose, you should know the impact, discriminatory actions, and ways to comply, and penalties for non-compliance. When we look now into advantages, it promotes equal opportunities and fair treatment in the workplace. The appointment process is clearly defined, so all parties are well informed what they should do to be qualified. And then it motivates employees because everyone has the same employment opportunity in the workplace. So hence we call it the Employment Equity Act. And then it promotes the implementation of affirmative action measures to address the imbalances of now employment. So what do we mean by affirmative action? Remember, this is a policy under your Employment Equity Act that emphasizes that in the process of employing, the business should consider those who are qualified and suitable, who were designated. And another word for designated can be previously disadvantaged. This can be your women are considered, or your females are considered to be previously disadvantaged, because in the past they would say the woman's place is in the kitchen. So basically that meant women were not meant for working, women were not meant for senior positions. So that now meant they were discriminated, or they were not given equal opportunities. It also talks to those who were disabled, to say they should be considered in the process of employing, and everyone who was disadvantaged by the apartheid system is considered to be under the employment equity, to be previously disadvantaged. Hence, now affirmative action measures address the imbalances of the past through employment. And then when we look into disadvantages, if you fail now to comply, what can be the disadvantages? Fines or penalties for non-compliance. Compliant businesses may be expensive for the business, so that can lead to high cost, and that is not good for the business. And diversity in the workplace may lead to conflict or unhappiness, because it means people from different backgrounds now have to accommodate each other, which can lead to conflict. And then skilled people from designated groups may demand higher salaries, which increases the salary expenses of the business, and it is expensive to train or employ someone who knows little about the act, so that becomes a disadvantage as well. And then when we look into discriminatory actions according to the Employment Equity Act, not employing a young woman because she would want to have children in the future is considered to be discriminating against that young woman. And according to Employment Equity Act, remember, there should be equal opportunities for everyone. And then refusing to employ a person because he or she has strong religious beliefs or has a disability is considered to be discriminating against that individual, and it is not allowed according to the Employment Equity Act. And doing an HIV test, unless justified by the court of law, now is considered to be discriminatory by the act. And then denying people access to workplace based on gender, race, culture, and treating them unfairly is considered to be discriminatory according to the act as well. And then when we look into penalties, to say after you have discriminated, what can be the penalties for not complying with this act? For instance, businesses may face heavy fines for non-compliance. They can be ordered to pay compensation or damages to the employees. Labor inspectors may investigate, inspect, or ask questions about complaints. And then labor inspectors may conduct on-site visits to interview employees, which can create a bad image for the organization or business. And a compliance order might be issued to the business that does not comply with the Employment Equity Act. What you should know, my tip is that now when the examiner develops scenarios, they use your ways to comply. They use the non-compliance. They use the discriminatory actions to develop the scenario. For instance, they can use the issue of heavy fines for non-compliance. They can use the issue of labor inspectors investigating, but you should be able to tell that this is from which act. Let's look into ways to comply, because when you're looking into ways to comply, different acts have different ways to comply, and try maybe to develop a scenario with you guys so that you understand how this scenario is developed. It is developed using your notes. Hence, if you don't know the notes, you will fail to understand what the scenario is about, and leading to you failing to identify the correct act. Now, businesses must guard against discriminatory appointments, and then they should also promote equal opportunities and fair treatment, and then implement an employment equity plan, and they should also implement affirmative action measures to address disadvantages experienced by the designated groups. And then reasonable accommodation of people from designated groups should be there, and they should also ensure that there's equal representation of all races in every level of employment. Let's try to develop a scenario using ways to comply with Employment Equity Act. Let's say now we have a business called Lihle Traders. We have a business called Lihle Traders. So how can a scenario be developed from that? I will try to write something you guys can see. We say Lihle Traders sells grocery items in Thokoza. Now let's see how now the examiner would use this. The examiner maybe would say the owner Lihle promotes equal opportunities. Full stop. And then maybe we say also implement employment equity plans. And then a question would come after the scenario. So this is our scenario. Lihle Trader sells grocery items in Thokoza. The owner Lihle promotes equal opportunities, also implements employment equity plans. Which 2 points did we use to develop our scenario? We used promoting equal opportunities, and we also used implementing now an employment equity plan. So that is considered to be what? If a question comes, the question would say identify the act applicable to the scenario and motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario. So you should know then to say, because they're talking about promoting equal opportunities, this becomes your keyword. This becomes your keyword. Discriminatory appointments, affirmative action becomes your keyword. Employment equity plan becomes your keyword in developing now the scenario for the examiner. But for you, when you are identifying during the exam, you should know that immediately we are talking about equal opportunities and maybe employing equity plan. If you know your keywords for that particular act, you will be able to safely identify to say the act applicable there is employment equity. And then after that, you motivate using what is on the scenario. Then you have to say the owner. Because you quote as it is the owner. Who's the owner? The owner Lihle promotes equal opportunities. So that shows that now you understand that the act is employment equity and you are motivating. So normally learners get it wrong, and we don't want that to happen. Just know that your notes are used to develop the scenario. So if you don't know your notes, then you'll have a problem. And stop writing things that are not asked from the question. So that is how now you would do it in your section B. But when we are looking into now section C, with your section C now, you are expected to provide an essay. Let's say an essay now is there. This is an example of an essay from 2019 question paper. So you would have a preamble. This is considered to be a preamble. It's just a statement reminding you of the act. We have the Employment Equity Act according to the preamble. This is an act of 1998, which was introduced to promote equity in the workplace. Businesses are obliged to now comply with the requirements of the act or face penalties for non-compliance. Now, the question comes, the instruction comes, as an expert on recent legislation, write an essay on the following employment equity aspects. Not everything will be included. So remember, your essay should have subheadings. And where do you take your subheadings? You take your subheadings from the what now? from the scenario or from the question. So the first subheading should be the purpose of employment equity. You should also discuss the impact of the act on businesses. You should also advise businesses on the consequences of penalties for non-compliance or which they can face for not complying with the Employment Equity Act, and suggest practical ways in which businesses can comply with the Employment Equity Act. So remember, your essay should start by having what? Introduction. You introduce. After introducing, you skip a line. After skipping a line, you start with the first subheading, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and then the last part is your conclusion. So your conclusion is there, and then after the conclusion, you conclude your essay, and then you will be able to get the marks that are nice. And remember, you should give examples that shows that you have researched about you. So this is how normally you would approach your essay. You have your introduction. This is how the essay was introduced. The Employment Equity Act was introduced to redress now the economic imbalances of the past. 1 mark. Under introduction, each point is 1 mark. And then after, the employment equity applies to all employees or employers and people applying for a job. That's 1 as well. And this would be considered to be maximum because you have received already your 2 for the introduction. Thereafter, in your paper, you would have to skip a line and go to the first subheading. What is your first subheading? Is the purpose of Employment Equity Act. What is the purpose of Employment Equity Act? Is to ensure that employees who do the same work would be paid equally, 2 marks for that, and then eliminate discrimination on the ground of gender, on the ground of race, on the ground of disability in the workplace, promote equal opportunities and fair treatment in the workplace. That's 2 as well, and protect employees from victimization if they exercise the rights given to them by the Employment Equity Act. 2 as well, and then promote diversity in the workplace by ensuring that people of diverse backgrounds are appointed. That's 2. Then you get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's 10 for this now. Purpose, the first subheading, and then you skip a line. Remember, before you introduced and you skipped a line, then you move to another, which is the impact now of your Employment Equity Act. There you would be expected to provide positives or negatives, and it is not necessarily important for you to give headings to say these are the positives or these are the negatives or disadvantages. You can mix everything, and no restrictions or no mark allocation would be now taken, or no penalization will take place. So what are the positives there? It encourages consultation between the employer and the employee. We split marks because the question was discuss or explain. Motivate employees because the workforce is more diverse or representative or inclusive. That's 2 as well. Create a framework, 1, of acceptable employment practices or affirmative action measures. 2 as well, and then appointment processes should be clearly defined and all parties should be well informed. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is 8, and we proceed. It increases administration burden as businesses may compile or submit employment equity every 2 years. Expensive to train someone who will not know anything about the act or little about the act. Other groups may not respect the knowledge, skills, or experience of the employment equity appointed candidate, which may lead to conflict. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then the mark allocation there can be 14 for that subheading. And then as we proceed, we look into now. Remember, before you proceed, you skip a line. Your work should be neat so that the marker is able to track down the number of subheadings you have. And then consequences, what are the penalties there? Labor inspectors may have now conduct on-site visits to interview employees, which can create a bad image, 2 marks. And then a compliance order might be issued to businesses that do not comply with the Employment Equity Act, and business may be brought before the labor court if compliance orders are not adhered to and no effort is made to reach their targets, meaning by hiring those who were previously disadvantaged. And labor inspectors may investigate or inspect or ask questions about complaints. So this would be the learner would get 8 here. We skip a line, then move into the other part, practical ways as we proceed. Again, 2 marks for that because businesses should guard against discriminatory appointments. and then assess the racial compositions of all employees, including senior management, 2, and then ensure that there's equal representation, 2 marks. Clearly define processes, 2 as well. Ensure that diversity or inclusivity in the workplace is achieved, 2. Prepare an employment equity plan consultation with employees, 2, and then you'd get 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12 for that. For example, there we have ShopRite, which ensures that they have both males and females in their stores. They have 40% males and 60% females. Now, this would be considered to be an example which shows originality, to say you understand the concept, you understand the issue of Employment Equity Act, because both males and females are in the store. And then as we proceed your conclusion, the employment equity does not only promote or regulate affirmative action, but they also give guidance on a fair. So when we are looking into that, you get 2, and this is considered to be max. And then this is how we mark an essay now, Flaso. The last subheading, this is the last subheading. You'd get A if you have all the subheadings, and this learner has all the subheadings. And then because the learner obviously has obtained 16 and above, you get another A. And then when you're looking into now the facts here, to say this is 2, and remember you skip the line there, you have 32 max because the learner has obtained more. 32 max now, 32 max. And then what is the last? So there we are looking into the structure to say, does the learner have introduction? Yes, the learner does have introduction. The learner also has conclusion. We need to give the introduction an L. Yes, you saw the L there. Then because you introduced and you also approached to answer, you get 0.2 for that. And A, the subheadings, does the learner have all the subheadings? Yes, that's the first A. Did the learner obtain 16 marks and above? Yes, that's another one. Then 0.2. Then when we look into synthesis, is the essay relevant? Did the learner get more than 50% of the subheadings correct? Yes, we saw that. That's 2. And then originality, is the learner having an example? Yes, the learner has an example. For example, that example was ShopRite ensures that they both have males and females in their store, and they have 40% of males or 60% of females. That is now 60. That is an example, and then you get 0.2, and the total mark now for this learner should be 40 out of 40, because normally what happens is that learners would basically get 32 for the facts, which is total. They would write their essay, introduction and conclusion. They would provide all the subheadings and get 16 and above, and provide relevant essay, which is 50% and more of subheadings correct, but they would fail to give an example using originality. So give an example so that you are able to get your 40 out of 40 for an essay. Give an example that shows that you have researched, that shows that you relate to the content. Hence, you get 2 marks for just giving that example. And that example you should not create a subheading for the example. It should be an example within the subheading. As you see, practical ways to comply. For example, ShopRite ensures that they have both males and females. So please make sure that you provide examples so that you get 40 out of 40 for your essay. Then we look into another act, which is Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act. When we are looking into that particular act, this is what you should know. This is why the act was developed. It was to provide comprehensive protection to employees who are injured in the course of performing their duty. Another one is that COEDA applies to all casual and full-time workers who become injured or ill or disabled or killed due to a workplace accidents or disease. It excludes workers who are guilty of willful misconduct, workers who are working outside South Africa for at least 12 months, or members of the South African Defence Force or the police service. It also provides for the establishment of the compensation board, whose function is to advise the Minister of Labour on the application or provisions of COEDA. So that is the purpose. This is an act that is developed to ensure that it protects workers while they're performing their duties, because accidents happen, and when those accidents happen, workers should be compensated for that, because some workers actually get injured to an extent that they fail to work, which now is a problem because some workers are breadwinners. So it means the family now would have to struggle due to the disability that incurred while the employee was performing their duties and responsibilities. What are the positives for that particular act is that positives are the idea that it promotes safety in the workplace. Claiming processes are relatively simple, and it means now workers can get their claims very fast, and employees do not contribute towards this fund. Is an advantage for the workers because their safety, they don't pay for their safety, but the business or the employer has to pay. And then it eliminates time and cost spent on lengthy civil court proceedings, and any compensation to an employee or the family is exempted from income tax. And then the employers are protected from a financial burden should an accident occur in the workplace, provided that the employer was not negligent. So employers or employees are protected. And then when we look into the negatives, that the claiming processes can be time consuming, and domestic or military workers are not covered, which now is unfair. And then workers who are temporarily or permanently employed in foreign countries are also not covered, and that now is a disadvantage. And then employers may be forced to pay heavy penalties if they are found guilty of negligence, maybe for failing to repair a machine, maybe for failing to give a precautionary measure on how to use the machine, and not enforcing safety measures, hence they say. And then implementation processes or procedures may required by the act might be expensive, and then procedures required by this act might be costly, as paperwork places an extra administrative burden on the business. And then when you look into discriminatory actions, according to the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, is the idea that the employer who bribes or prevents employees from reporting accidents is actually discriminating against them, and providing false information about previous or serious accidents or occupational diseases is basically discriminating, because you are not helping to improve the situation and improve the safety of your workers as an employer. And an employer who does not contribute to the compensation fund, because an employer has to pay every month so that they protect their workers, then they are considered to be discriminating against their workers. And then employers who do not allow claims to be proceeded for injuries, they are discriminating against their injured employees. And then employers that take too long to process claims or delay the claiming process are also considered to be discriminating against the employees. What can be the penalties? Because the discriminatory actions in a way show signs of failing to comply. So penalties are punishments that can be now laid for that particular business or employer who has failed to do what is right to promote the safety of their workers. So businesses can be fined for refusing to lodge the complaint or contravening the act. And then businesses can also be forced to make large payments if they did not take the necessary precautions according to the act, meaning the act now promotes further the issue of safety by making sure that precautionary measures should be there, instructions should be there on how to use the machines that might be dangerous. The machines cannot be used by anyone who doesn't have the skills or competencies to use that particular machine. So if a business did not do the measures, did not provide instructions, did not ensure that the right person is using the machine and the person who's using the machine has the skills and competencies, then the business can be considered to be now negligent, and that can lead to them paying for that particular mistake, and then they may be forced to pay any recovery costs required by the compensation fund if they fail to comply or pay towards the compensation fund. And employees may take businesses to court for not registering them with the commissioner of the compensation fund. It means now the business has to pay or register their workers so that they can be covered by the compensation fund. And remember, the more more the number of workers, it means the more compensation the business has to pay, or the more amount has to be contributed towards the compensation board. So if the business now are found guilty of any misconduct, they will have to pay large penalties or face imprisonment. So those are penalties that can be imposed to a business that has failed to comply. Then when you look into ways to comply with COEDA, businesses should provide health and safe working environment. They should also ensure that premises or equipment or machinery is in good working condition. They should also register the compensation with the compensation commissioner and provide particulars of the business and the employees. And they should also report all incidences causing death, injury, or illness of employees. And levies must be paid to the compensation fund. Levies are paid so that workers can be covered, and they should keep record of employees' income and details of work for 4 years. So that is how the business can comply. Now, we have an activity. Let's look now into our question. Remember, we have 1.1, outline the purpose of compensation for occupational injuries and disease act. Now, we'll be looking into 6 marks for that, and then we have to read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have Lexi manufacturers. The management provided the commissioner with false information regarding serious accidents that took place at Lexi manufacturers. They also bribed one of the employees not to report injuries sustained while performing his or her duties. 1.1.1. You are expected to identify the act that is applicable in the scenario below, and also when we look into 1.1.2, code 2 actions that now can be regarded as discriminatory to the act identified in question 1.1.1. Then discuss the impact of the act identified in 1.1.1. Now, the verbs used here, they tell you the type of question. Even the mark allocation gives you an indication. So when we are looking into identify, this is low order, code is low order, but discuss is considered to be middle order. So you are just expected to identify, and because you see the issue of accidents, because you see the issue of reporting injuries, you should know that the act applicable there, which is compensation for occupational injuries and disease, that's COEDA. And then when you look into code, you should know now the act that is applicable when we are talking about coding is now you take the sentence as it is, because we are just quoting from the scenario. And when you are discussing now the impact, you use 1.1 as your source to say which act did you identify. So if you identified COEDA, it means now you provide the impact for COEDA. So this is a follow-on question. So it is important that you identify the act properly, because if you fail to identify the correct act, it means your impact here, you would be discussing the impact of a wrong act. Now let's start with the first part, which focuses now on the issue of the act, which is the purpose. It provides comprehensive protection to employees as 2 marks, and then COEDA applies to all casual or full-time workers who become ill, injured, disabled, or killed due to workplace accidents. And then another one, it excludes workers who are guilty of willful misconduct, or workers working outside South Africa for at least 12 months, or members of the South African Defence Force. Then the other aspect is it provides establishment for compensation board whose function is to advise the Minister of Labour. That's 2 as well, but then we only take 6, so this is max. Then when we look into now identifying from the scenario, you have to read the scenario. You have Lexi manufacturers, which act there is applicable, COEDA, compensation for occupational injuries and disease, that's 2 for that. And then you proceed to quoting again from the what? From the scenario, we quote the idea that the management provided the commissioner with false information, 1, and then they also bribed one of the employees who did not report his or her, not to report his injuries sustained while performing their duties. That's 2 marks for that. Then we look into the impact. Remember, you use what for your impact? discuss the impact. We have positives. What are your positives? It promotes safety in the workplace. The claiming processes are relatively simple. Employees do not contribute towards this fund, and then it eliminates time and costs spent on lengthy civil court proceedings. The negatives, the claiming processes can be time consuming, and then domestic or military workers are not covered. So how do we mark that? It promotes safety. Claiming processes are relatively simple. Employees do not contribute towards the fund. It eliminates time or cost spent on lengthy civil proceedings. Claiming processes can be time consuming. Domestic or military workers are not covered. And then workers who are temporarily or permanently employed in foreign countries are not covered as well, and employees might pay heavy fines if they are negligent in their safety measures. So that is how to get your 6. And remember, for you to get your 6, you'd be expected maybe to mix between 2 positives and 1 negatives, or provide positives only, or provide negatives only, or combine both. So you'd be obtain your 6 marks that way. Now let us look into a summary of our lesson. We looked into a lot, the structure of the paper. Remember, the paper is made of 150. We have section A, we have section B, and section C. I said you have your business what? Business, environment, and business operations, and you'd be having 15 marks for each. Then with your section B, you have question 2, 3, and what? Question 4. So with your question 2, you have your business environment. With question 3, you have your business operation. Question 4, you have a combination of both. Section C, you have question 5 and 6. Business environment would be your question 5. Business operation is your question 6. Then we also have main topics. Remember, your business environment and business operations, those are your main topics. Then when we are looking into legislation, we looked into Employment Equity Act and Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, hoping that would help you in your revision. So that was basically our lesson. We looked into Employment Equity Act, the purpose, the impact. We looked into compliance, penalties, and discriminatory action, and did the same for Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act. So we looked into the purpose, the impact, discriminatory actions, and also looked into ways to comply with that particular act and what can be the penalties if you fail. I showed you how to identify how the scenario is developed and how you would answer. The keywords are important when you're studying, because with the scenario, we develop the scenario using the keywords. So that was our lesson, hoping it made sense, and that is the end of our presentation. Keep well. Goodbye.